On this Sunday night, Iran peace talks collapse. What's next for the war?
They have chosen not to accept our terms.
As President Trump announces a U.S. blockade of the vital Strait of Hormuz. Orban is out. Hungary's longtime leader, an ally of Trump and Putin, concedes defeat. The consequences for Ukraine. By-election eve, why the Prime Minister is poised to claim a majority. Plus, down to earth.
You're not looking at us. We are a mirror reflecting you.
How the Artemis II crew captured the hearts of the human race.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with anxious uncertainty over the war in Iran. After 21 hours of peace talks in Pakistan between senior U.S. and Iranian officials, the negotiations ended overnight with no agreement. Now, President Donald Trump says he's ordered the U.S. Navy to begin a blockade of ships in the Strait of Hormuz, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Iran launched its own blockade of the critical oil shipping route at the start of the war, allowing only a small number of allied ships to pass through. The U.S. move would mark another major escalation and is raising fears for the shaky ceasefire. Reggie Cecchini has our top story tonight.
This was the moment hopes were dashed.
The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement.
It was never a sure bet that decades of tensions would ease in one day, and after 21 hours of talks, the gap between warring nations was simply too wide.
We just could not get to a situation where the Iranians were willing to accept our terms.
Among the issues unable to be ironed out, the Strait of Hormuz. The number of vessels getting through is fractional, and eager to move on, Donald Trump threatened an act of war, blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave. It could extract economic pain on Iran, but it carries risk.
The country that at the moment is benefiting from passage of ships through the strait is China. And President Trump is due to have a summit with President Xi in the middle of May, so in a few weeks. So it's very hard to see how this strategy would work.
With each side claiming the other was asking too much, nuclear enrichment sat as one of the biggest roadblocks. Iran has repeatedly said its program is civilian and that it has the right to enrich for that purpose.
We can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
And while dismantling it was a main objective for Donald Trump, U.S. intelligence suggests there was never an imminent threat. Iran's capabilities were severely set back in airstrikes last summer, but they still exist, and Iran was likely never going to trade it away for a small price.
If they do not give up that effort, is that the plan? Will you further destruct Iran?
Yeah, I will.
These are two countries with serious trust issues, and while Iranian officials claim diplomacy never disappears, this setback in talks could escalate things.
It's very hard to see how more military action is going to bring a conclusion. You need some kind of a political strategy behind military action.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard has threatened consequences if military vessels approach the strait, and with new threats from Donald Trump to, quote, finish up the little that's left of Iran at an appropriate moment, the fragile ceasefire, Jeff, may be hanging by a thread.
Reggie Cecchini in Washington. Thanks, Reggie. Israel launched more strikes targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon today as the Lebanese government prepares for rare direct talks with Israel this week. The U.S. will mediate those negotiations in Washington, which are expected to focus on disarming Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant group. Lebanon is pushing for a temporary pause in the fighting ahead of those talks, but Israel has rejected that request, and attacks continue from both sides. Since the U.S. and Iran announced their ceasefire last week, Israel has only intensified its attacks in Lebanon. Lebanese authorities say more than 2,000 people have been killed, including around 200 children. Last week, this one-year-old girl, Talin Saeed, was killed in an Israeli strike. The rocket hit while she was attending her father's funeral after he was killed in an earlier strike. Talin's 7-year-old sister, Aileen, barely survived, wrapped in bloody bandages after suffering severe burns and a head injury. We thought there was a ceasefire, so we went to the graveyard. It was like a sudden storm, the girl's grandfather says. This isn't humanity, this is a war crime. Turning to the war in Ukraine now, Kyiv and Moscow are accusing each other of thousands of ceasefire violations after a truce that was supposed to begin on Saturday to coincide with Orthodox Easter. A Ukrainian military chaplain blessed a traditional Easter meal for soldiers on the front lines. The 32-hour ceasefire, which also included a prisoner swap, expired at midnight local time. And you can bet Ukrainian officials are celebrating tonight's election result in Hungary. Hungarians just voted for a new prime minister. Péter Magyar is now on track for a landslide victory. The election marks the end to the 16-year rule of Viktor Orban, who had close ties to both U.S. President Trump and Russian President Putin. Orban had repeatedly vetoed European Union efforts to provide aid for Ukraine. Jillian Piper reports on the election's global implications.
Center-right leader Péter Magyar, who ran on messages of anti-corruption and strengthening European ties, has ended Viktor Orban's 16-year run as Hungarian prime minister. We have reclaimed our country, he says. The transition will be peaceful and smooth due to the strong mandate.
I am here to win. And what if you lose? No, I like to win.
A powerful leader in the far-right movement, Orban appeared confident earlier on election day, later saying in his concession speech that it was a painful loss. I congratulated the victorious party, he said, adding he and his party will never give up and will serve their nation from opposition. Orban was close with President Vladimir Putin, repeatedly clashing with the European Union by opposing sending aid to Ukraine. Magyar's victory also seen as a win for European leaders, even though he too is skeptical of sending Ukraine aid. In a congratulatory message, European Union President Ursula von der Leyen wrote, "Europe's heart is beating stronger in Hungary tonight." Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also offering well wishes, saying in a written statement that Ukraine has always sought good neighborly relations with everyone in Europe, and we are ready to advance our cooperation with Hungary. The historic election saw a record-breaking voter turnout of 77.8%, with Hungarians abroad lining up to cast their ballots in the UK and Germany. Many voters pointed to the country's global relations as the key issue on the line.
We are making friends with Russia and China and all these kinds of authoritarian regimes, and I don't like that. I don't like where my country's headed.
U.S. President Donald Trump openly endorsed Orban for another term, but ultimately Hungarians chose their own path. Jillian Piper, Global News, Ottawa.
Turning to election news here in Canada, 3 pivotal by-elections are set to be held tomorrow in Ontario and Quebec, and they're widely expected to give Prime Minister Mark Carney control of Parliament. The Liberal Party sits just 1 seat shy of a majority government, thanks to 5 floor crossers from other parties in recent months. One of the closest by-election races is expected to be in Terrebonne, Quebec, and that's where we find our Mackenzie Gray tonight. Mac.
This will be the closest of the 3 by-elections on Monday. Jeff, Terrebonne has been a Bloc Québécois stronghold until the last election, where the Liberals won by 1 vote.
Largely thanks to Mark Carney, with his signs up around the riding even more than the local candidate. In this quintessential small Quebec town, just off the island of Montreal.
I love Carney.
The area heavily francophone.
Que lors de la dernière élection.
Non, parce que Nathalie, en tout cas, moi, c'est le Bloc.
This man hoping it's not as close as last time, and the Bloc pull out the victory in a by-election called by the Supreme Court after an error on mail-in ballots from Elections Canada meant some Bloc voters' ballots weren't counted.
This is an opportunity for the people of Terrebonne to vote according to what are the interests of Terrebonne and what is the personality and identity of the people of Terrebonne, which are quite like all Quebecers.
Tatiana Auguste.
The Liberals pulling out all the stops to hold the riding, prominently featuring the local candidate during their convention in Montreal. Along with the candidates in 2 other by-elections in Toronto, also set for Monday. Both the Toronto seats viewed as safe Liberal bets.
I'm a family doctor at Women's College Hospital, running to represent this community in Parliament. Were you aware that it's happening on Monday?
The Liberals only need 1 seat to get a majority government, something 53% of Canadians want, according to new polling done by Ipsos for Global News. The Liberals are in this position thanks to 5 floor crossers who likely had their mind changed in part due to high polling numbers from Carney, with the Liberals now up 12 points on the Conservatives.
I think the Liberals are going to be sleeping quite nicely on Sunday night and getting ready to celebrate on the Monday.
Carney won't be at the by-election parties in either Toronto or Quebec, instead watching the results in Ottawa, Jeff, then returning to the House of Commons on Tuesday, likely with a majority government.
Mackenzie Gray in Terrebonne, Quebec. Thanks, Mac. And turning to another important vote in Quebec, the province has just chosen its next premier. Christine Frechette has won the leadership of the governing CAQ party, replacing outgoing Premier François Legault. Frechette will have her work cut out to rebuild the party's support. Our Dan Spector reports.
The 33rd Premier of Quebec will be Christine Frechette. The 56-year-old has claimed victory in the race to succeed François Legault as the leader of the CAQ. She will become the second ever female Premier in Quebec's history, but it might not be a very long reign. In her victory speech, Frechette said she represents a new generation for Quebec. She said she wants to reduce pressure on families dealing with the spiking cost of living, to protect Quebec's culture and identity, and to create optimism for the future. She takes over for Premier François Legault, who announced his resignation in January amid plummeting poll numbers for the party he founded. Legault was the least popular premier in Canada, and now it'll be on Frechette to breathe fresh air into the party's sails as its second ever leader, with the next provincial election just 6 months away. She's originally from Trois-Rivières. Before deciding to run for the CAQ on the South Shore of Montreal in 2022, she was a high-ranking staffer in the Parti Québécois. She became a trusted member of Legault's inner circle. He appointed her immigration minister and later economy minister. Frechette was the favorite to win the leadership race against Bernard Drinville and had the support of 41 CAQ MNAs, including 17 ministers. Drinville left the convention without speaking to journalists, leading some to wonder how unified the party will be moving forward.
I'm glad that the members gave me their confidence. I'm really proud of that, and I will be working very hard. And we will unite the party, and we will work for Quebecers and implement change very quickly.
It's our duty to work together, and everybody has the same feeling.
There was also a lengthy tribute to François Legault during the convention. He gave his final speech as premier, and the room was full of emotion. He will stay on as the MNA for L'Assomption until the election in October, but will step back from the spotlight. The next step is for Frechette to be sworn in. She's expected to hit the ground running with some policy announcements in the near future. But will she be able to raise the party from its pitiful position in the polls to become a contender in time for this fall's election? That's the question she'll need to answer in the coming days and weeks. Dan Spector, Global News, Drummondville, Quebec.
Missing and murdered Indigenous women coming up. A vigil for a young woman whose remains were identified last week. An emotional vigil was held in Winnipeg to remember a First Nations woman whose remains were recently identified after she went missing 3 years ago. Police are investigating her death as suspicious. Our Hersh Singh reports.
A grieving family and hundreds of supporting community members.
It was something heartfelt that you could feel within all the people, even the strangers that you didn't know, can give hugs.
Gathered at a vigil to honor Leah Keeper, a Manitoba First Nations mother who went missing in 2023. Her partial remains were discovered in late November 2025, and this week police confirmed her identity by a DNA test.
Tuesday since we got the news, and then it's been a tiring few days. And Leah's remains will be given to my sister tomorrow.
Keeper was last seen in Winnipeg's North End in July 2023, and her remains are now to be handed over to her family on Sunday.
Scared. Scared. It's a somber feeling because of how often we have to get together, how often we have to come stand with families, and how often we have to come and support. We're doing it far too often. There needs to be more resources in place.
When you put your stuff into the fire and it goes back up into the spirit world, and that's what Leah liked doing. She liked the bonfire, so I wanted to honor her that way.
Keeper's family is now calling on provincial and federal government for better supports as they say the community struggles to gather funds to search for more missing people.
Because there's still more people that need to be searched for. There's still more people out there that need the help from Canada.
For now, Winnipeg police say that investigators continue to investigate Leah Keeper's suspicious death. Hersh Singh, Global News, Winnipeg.
The Biebs is back. Still ahead, the Canadian pop star is joined by his younger self at a major comeback concert.
You make me fall in love with your eyes. No, I can't be the only one.
Canadian Justin Bieber sang a duet with his younger self last night at Coachella. It was his biggest live show performance in 4 years after the pop star canceled a world tour for health reasons. This video was captured by fellow singer Katy Perry, who brought her beau, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Perry posted a flurry of photos from the famous festival on her social media. A Saskatchewan whiskey company is toasting to their success. The craft distillery swept an entire category at the country's top whiskey competition. Global's Sonia Ali caught up with the couple behind the homegrown brand.
Take the glass and just pour.
Based in Lumsden, Saskatchewan, this small distillery is making a lasting impact in Canada. Last Mountain Distillery is known for their one-of-a-kind Baldur's whiskey line and recently won gold, silver, and bronze in one category of the Best Canadian Whiskey competition.
We're Saskatchewan's first micro-distillery, so we've been making whiskey for longer than anybody else in the province, and we have some of the oldest whiskeys in the province, which I think is pretty amazing and we're really proud of. So to get the recognition from the blind taste tests is really awesome for us.
The distilleries submitted bottles for each category in the event, which are blind taste tested and rated based on quality and taste. The single-release, single-barrel whiskey is one of a kind due to its ever-changing recipe.
We didn't want to make just one whiskey, one flavor profile. We're passionate about all different types of whiskey, so playing with rye, wheat, corn, malted barley, even making our own bourbon going back 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years ago. We started making our own bourbon and our own sour mash starter.
One pub in Regina, Bushwhackers Brew Pub, has watched Last Mountain Distillery grow for years and is excited to see Saskatchewan being recognized when it comes to whiskey and vodka.
To see Saskatchewan performing so well on the national and international stage, not only for Last Mountain Distillery, but there's some other Saskatchewan distilleries that are doing very, very well. It's a great sense of pride. Rah, rah, Saskatchewan.
The winning husband and wife duo have no plans of slowing their pace of creating new products anytime soon.
We've been making whiskey a really long time, and we've definitely always gotten some recognition for our whiskey, but to get gold, silver, and bronze in one category is, pretty special.
Sonia Ali, Global News.
Reflections from space coming up. Why the legacy of the Artemis 2 mission. Welcome back. China is preparing to host a half marathon with a twist. Take a look at this. The runners are robots. Beijing just completed a full-scale test for its humanoid robot half marathon. The actual race, the first of its kind, will take place on April 19th, with more than 100 teams participating. Now, the robots aren't as fast as human marathon runners, but organizers note the technology, like the bots themselves, is catching up fast. The Artemis 2 crew is now safely back here on Earth and reunited with their families. The astronauts brought home more than scientific data. Throughout the mission, they wore their hearts on their spacesuits, showing genuine emotion, reflections, and pride. It served as a reminder that space has the power to inspire and capture our imaginations. Mike Armstrong reports.
There is our planet.
If this was the view out the window, who among us wouldn't pull out their phone? Well, in the top left, that's Commander Reed Weissman snapping photos just minutes before re-entry, the most dangerous part of the mission. Then, like any of us, he shows them to the people around and then holds his phone up to the camera for mission control to see.
We're going to need a copy of that photo when you guys get back.
It's fun to play with water in space.
There were moments like that from start to finish. What made this mission different wasn't just where the Artemis 2 crew went, that was part of it, but it was how they shared, not just the awe, but their emotions.
And we would like to call it Carol.
There was that voice crack when Jeremy Hansen and the crew named a crater after Weissman's late wife, followed by a group hug and some tears. But there was also laughter. The crew was having fun and didn't hide it. In fact, even when the toilet was acting up, they were open about it.
Breaking news, at this time, you are go for all types of uses of the toilet.
And the crew rejoices. Thank you.
Now, if the crew was a little more relaxed, they weren't alone. Even Mission Control seemed to embrace the lighter moments.
We look like we're smiling at you, like a little Cheshire cat.
Back on Earth and back at NASA, the crew was still sharing the emotions.
Well, it's been a lot. This isn't helping. But this is the furthest I've been away from Reed in a long time. Thank you. All right, that's good. Thank you.
It was that openness and joy that made it feel like we were along for the ride. There's something contagious about watching people fulfill a lifelong dream and share it the way they did. It's hard not to smile along, even if you are a bit jealous.
And we have a great view of the moon out window 2. Looks a little smaller than yesterday.
Guess we'll have to go back.
Mike Armstrong, Global News, Houston.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Halifax, where a piece of Canadian history just rolled into town. The van from Terry Fox's Marathon of Hope was just unveiled at the city's Steel Wheels Motor Museum, a tribute to a legacy that still resonates more than 4 decades later. Thanks for watching. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Have a great night.